I'm talking and I can see my waveform, but once again, my waveform is like very perturbed. And
Well, mine's a lot higher.
so let me go into my sound control panel, and I do have my input volume all the way up. So, it's kind of funny. I don't know what else I can
Right. Well,
do.
I can send this also over to support and say, look at this, look at this.
Okay.
And then maybe next week we do Zoom and compare the sound volume and even point them
Exactly.
to that then too.
Right. Let's
Because,
keep checking things.
yeah,
Exactly.
even if ultimately we end up saying, yeah, we could just go with Zoom or some newfangled whatever comes out, it's always nice to help poor programmers that are struggling to.
Exactly. Just,
And,
because
and you know
I'm not
what?
trying to be mysterious to them. I'm trying to be like, I didn't realize I had anywhere near a non-standard configuration. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is pretty standard, easy stuff. If I can buy it through Amazon and hook up to my computer, they must have tested their stuff with a vast array
Yeah.
of different brands and stuff like that.
Well,
Um,
this is an example of what we were just talking about too, because you're on a Mac, but is the problem Mac or is it the hardware? Is it Chrome? I mean, you can
yeah,
blame
yeah.
Mac and Apple all day. It could be Chrome, which is Google, nothing with Mac or Apple at all.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. The fact that Zen only supports Chrome and actually was supporting Firefox and has now stopped, it lets you know that there's things very particular about
Yeah.
each of these various different browsers that support or don't support the various different um, foundational libraries that they use to
Right.
do the access of audio and video, and that some are superior to others, or some are just they're all persnickety. And instead of them trying to do it for all three, all 10, they just say nope, we're standardizing on
Right.
one. And
Yeah. A lot more of that going around.
uh,
And actually, Firefox has been getting dropped more and more by companies supporting it.
yeah, see, honestly, that's a weird one because
Yeah.
that's for all the proof that open source, having many, many eyes looking at it, and the fact that they have, in so many ways, the best security, very good speed, et cetera, they just decide, no, three's too many, let's go with two. And there's a sickness to that. You know what I mean? The fact that they
Right.
have HTML5 and that they have kind of universal standards for how this should work, well,
Well,
that,
it's still also, I mean, it could be open source. It could be 1,000 guys working on it, but all those guys have families and day jobs. And so they work on
true.
it when they get a moment. And I'm not saying that's every project, as opposed to Google, who says, look, we want the 10 best programmers and we're going to pay you shit ton of money if you make this work better. And, that the
Yeah.
reality comes down to that a lot of times.
It's interesting. That is an interesting philosophical discussion to have because that has never changed from the birth of open source that people talk about, that if you're kind of casual about it, that it must by definition be less or lag behind or whatever. But the other thing would be Google itself says, hey, we want to have 80% of your time, 20% of your time, work on whatever passion projects you have and
Right.
create
That's
miracles.
true.
And so that's how you're going to get Google Maps and Google Mail and stuff like that, Gmail, is because someone said, I'm going to write the best gosh darn email client I possibly can. And just like Linux came to be because Linus Torvalds decided I can do this better. And it'll be a matter of personal pride, a matter of I have an obsessive nature. I love getting into the bits and bytes and the nits and close to the iron as I possibly can. And so I guess it's kind of that is like you said, you're the mercenary aspect, hire the best you possibly can and put them to it. I wonder how much that actively compares to the artiste, the person that does it out of passion and really doesn't care about money. They're motivated by, I have an operating system that runs 90% of the world's servers named after me. It's Linux. You know what I mean?
True. But when you get down to the software projects, how many projects are started with good intentions and then abandoned or haven't been updated for 5 years, so it's pretty
Totally agree.
pointless.
And in fact, it's kind of, boy, one of the biggest things that I had to deal with at Progressive when I was, director of databases was like, we can't design this so that this one brilliant programmer has created a beautiful thing, but in the fiery bus crash scenario, we lose him. And then this part of our business dies because nobody can maintain their code because nobody can keep it up. So I was always of the, you need to maintain you need to like Hmm. I hate write-only code. I hate like C++ with so much indirection that someone can stare at their own code 6 months later and not figure out what they were trying to do. Whereas if you do it with slightly less sophistication to what you're doing, but you let the very sophisticated compilers and linkers and that the people who are building those things have found a way to optimize every single thing you're trying to do. And it's not a matter of you doing memory overlays that you might have learned 20 years ago when you're having to do that to make you good use of memory. I was always kind of like, I'm going to design this and spec it out and do the budget for it based on lowest common denominator programmers because you kind of have to. You can't expect to always have stars. And this, sorry about this diss on Progressive, but I went to Progressive right after having been in Silicon Valley. I did my 2 years out in California doing .com things. Oh man, there was nowhere near the talent level at Progressive that there had been in virtually everybody that I worked with in Silicon Valley. And so it wasn't only a philosophical stance on my part, it was, I got to work with what I have. I don't have stars here. I have 1 star a department, 1 star a division, and I can't count on all these important good things being done in over a weekend. I got to
Right.
pull myself back to what I had really been spoiled by. And I'm trying not to be a jerk here. One of the things I really had to fight at Progressive was myself jumping in. I was hired on as high level database, like do strategic thinking and try to make it so that all these parts of multiple database environments and SQL Server and UDB, Oracle all work together. And so my going in and saying, let me write that SQL Server query a little bit better so that it'll be less expensive and run more. I continually had to say, well, I'll be able to show my people how to do it, but I can't be in the habit of putting aside my other responsibilities and going back to being a tech geek. And then unfortunately, without going into it too much, it really ended up costing me because I was so conscientious about that people started to be like, does he really know what he's talking about? It's like, wow, I could like code rings around you. It was a very odd kind of anti-humbling thing of, it's only because I'm choosing not to. Here, let's get back to, have you ever seen Quigley Down Under? It just came on Netflix, and it's, Tom Selleck, Magnum PI, if you will,
Yeah, yeah.
being a sharpshooter down in Australia. And without any kind of going into any spoilers, he's hired for his skill with like the old long distance. I think it's even a Sharps rifle. I don't remember the exact brand, but he can, shoot the wings off a flea at 500 yards or whatever like that. And then there's, of course, a big showdown, and they don't realize that, it's only because he prefers the rifle. He isn't like unable to do the gunslinging thing.
Right.
And
Eh,
so, I just, that's kind of like when you decide to give yourself a
right.
vacation from what you had become good at, there's really an ego thing of, well, step aside, punk. I'll take care of this for you. And I tried to never do that. So,
Two things with that. One, what you were just saying about the 5-star programmers versus one. That's going back to the Linux thing. When you're working with programmers on a project, you don't know their skill level. Some of them could just be very passionate, but be horrible. And yes, that's why you have so many people working on looking at code, but inevitably something gets through and you have problems. So it's not a perfect system. There are cons. But I know I'm laughing because I know what you're talking about. Like with people that I'm helping with computers, it's like I have to think of how to talk to them so they understand what I'm saying because I can't talk the way I would want to because it's way above their head. We were watching an old episode of Stargate and it had O'Neill and this other army guy, and then Carter, who's the astrophysicist, is like babbling this, that, and here's what's going on, blah, blah, blah. And the one looks at the air and says, don't even pretend that you knew what she was talking about. He's yeah, she's way smarter than we are. And and you laugh because they made it funny in that show, but there's so many times, especially with computer stuff, even now, I'm trying to like figure out how do I explain this database issue with this SQL statement and how to get it displayed on the screen. And I have this new whatchamacallit code to use and how it works. And, I'm just like, Well, it's kind of like getting a new set of wheels on a car. You got to figure
It's true.
something
You have
out.
to do a lot of things, because coding is a lot of that. It's like analogies. You know what I mean? You're not the way you're trying to um, virtualize what's going on here. You have to make it so that this data represents that thing, and you're going to model it so you include all the aspects of it that you want to deal with. But there's also some things that you say, I know that it doesn't include everything because it doesn't have to. I've already done enough of this kind of thing that if you're looking for I don't know, how to run a library, you don't necessarily have to account for every single field to get to workable quickly. And then every one of those additional, like it's kind of like, back when you used to do just pretty standard budgeting for program things, it was what's absolutely necessary, what are their trade-offs for how useful it is versus how much it'll take, and what are just the nice to haves. And so much of talking with users as to how you're writing the spec and you're going to be able to get to this new system at Ameritech it's happened all the time. People didn't have a great way of virtualizing to get to what are those categories. Like this thing that you're used to, it isn't really necessary. You just like it. And this thing that it's difficult, and so you don't think about it a lot, but it's absolutely the heart of a cost accounting system. You have to have an ID that will not change at all anywhere that you go, so that you can, it and having to do that explanation and virtualize the explanation itself as to, I need you to put a lot of thought into these concepts up front, what's easy, medium, and hard, and what's absolutely necessary versus we'd kind of like to have it versus it's just a frill up. And then don't spend a moment on the screen has to be green because I like green. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
and honestly, what's interesting is it's kind of funny. This is the whole, like the world of computing has changed. When you started to do Google engineering type things, it was, and maybe away from Google towards the internet. How did the internet come to be so successful? Because they didn't spec everything out perfectly before they even started. They just did things, tried things, and whatever got adopted by the most people became the de facto standard. And that worked fantastically for all kinds of protocols and screen layouts and all what it might be. And occasionally there were big debates about seemingly small stuff, but it's because people had come up with solutions that were like 51-49. There wasn't an obvious 80-20 winner. And so it was kind of cool to see, again, the passion that people put into it or the stubbornness. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? After
Yeah.
have you ever had a discussion about what editor to use in the early days of computing?
I
Good
remember those types of
Lord.
discussions. Yeah.
People that were just certain that it, and I don't even want to say them because it'll get really weird. People were certain that not only their editor, but how they had set it up so that they had the color coding for the various different things on their screen, that they could see what was a variable and what was, oh man, taking them out of their environment, it really made them angry. It wasn't just, well, what an inconvenience. It was like, this is a stupid way to do it. Nobody does this. I'm not just stepping down
Oh,
from
I,
oh man.
I love when the mouse came about and there were some diehards absolutely refusing to do anything on computers with the
Absolutely. If I
mouse.
can take
And
my hands off the keyboard, I'm not doing it.
yeah,
Exactly.
and I mean nowadays there you can still do just about everything with keyboard, this, that, and the other thing. But really, there are times it's just so much quicker to take a mouse and zoop zoop, and you get what you need as opposed to click this, hit this. It's kind of like playing the new video games of the kids, where I just throw my hands up. It's like, okay, hold this button and then hit this other one, and while you're doing it, push left, and you'll get this action. But if you hold that button, push the other one, and hit right, you get a different action. But if you then followed up with this other thing, I'm like, oh my god. Give me a joystick and a button. I'm good. Let me shoot little aliens.
And it's funny. Scott, I think that things go in cycles. By that meaning,
Yeah.
what you just talked about, the when WYSIWYG first came to be, what you see is what you get. That everything was visible on the screen in the font that it was going to be, or that just you could browse the menus and find out what all the
Yeah.
commands that are available are. Well, that was such a huge change. Back in the days of first word processors, you had like WordStar that you had to be able to embed a whole bunch of different control codes in order to be able to get certain effects on screen. And you had WordPerfect where you had to get a template that you'd put on to where your function keys was. And
Right.
each of those 10 function keys, depending on whether it was Control, Alt, or you know what I mean? It had, oh, that's going to be the save
That was big
versus the
business.
copy paste. Absolutely. And that after a while, if you use it enough, your hands got memory. You know what I mean? That you learn where things were on the keyboard, and then unfortunately, having to switch from WordStar or WordPerfect to Word, where they had standardized on a different set of things. I had all kinds of WordPerfect diehards that just they weren't going to switch from their hard-earned knowledge that they had, and that it was pretty efficient. You know what I mean? You really had the out of those 40 characteristics of your function keys plus the modifiers, you had the 40 most popular, most necessary things you had to do on your. But the advantage of you don't have to guess what it's going to look like when you print it. It looks like it's
Right,
going to look
right.
on the screen. And the joy of seeing different fonts for the first time, that it wasn't just you either had a monotype or a variable type font, and then you could play. You know what I mean? It was there were clear advantages, and yet people get set in their ways. They get, especially that thing of once you know something and you really had to work hard to do it. And bear with me, I don't mind. I hope you never mind popping around like we do.
Oh,
What's
really?
the
We do that?
really? So, have you heard about one of the big successes about QAnon? Is
Oh,
that
no.
people have designed it so that it isn't about read this one doc and you'll learn all about it and we're done. That instead, they've gamified it. They've made it that all this information is scattered around the internet. And when you go looking and you come up with just the right Google search or just the right series of links that gets you to what you think is the treasure trove of the secret conspiracy that runs the universe, you've earned it. You've worked so hard to get to it that then you're loath to not believe it. You want to believe it because you put so much into it.
Oh
And there
my
really
God.
is. You know
How
what I mean?
smart is that?
It is. And the fact that they've learned how to gamify minds, these are all mimetic devices that make it so that your mind will retain. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to be, it mattered to me. I want to share this with others. It's a meme that's like, hey, come and look at this cool thing that I learned about. And then you feel bigger because you get to turn other people onto it. So it's its own self-fulfilling virus. I mean, before meme meant a picture with words on it. The way that it first originated was Richard Dawkins in his books about heredity and how evolution works, talked about that there's lots of correspondence about how ideas pass through a population like a virus does, that it's infectious, that it jumps, that it can mutate and go to a different host, and that it doesn't matter whether it's good or not. There's no feature of the virus that gives an advantage. It just matters that it replicates with good fidelity again and again, very quickly and very successfully. And so the more that I hope, a little bit of Cassandra weirdness. I did a memes talk probably 20 years ago at a Mensa gathering when it was, okay, that's kind of wacky. I don't know that I want to believe that because I can see how that works for breakfast cereal ditties. The reason that everybody remembers Saturday morning cartoon show themes is because they were really great at writing those perfect little advertising jingles, those perfect little catchy songs. But it doesn't stop at catchy songs. It starts to be with political slogans. It starts to be with advertising. And it's not just, hey, kids, buy some tricks. It's, I'm going to make a decision based on a car, based on see the USA in your Chevrolet.
Yes.
Oh my God, they found out how to penetrate to where it goes right to your reptile brain.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Instead of getting to your processing center where you're going to make a choice based on fact.
Right. Have you ever heard of now it's guerrilla marketing?
Yes,
G
exactly. Where
U
they try to
Yeah,
make things go viral. They try to make it
right.
so that it's that
Eh,
the
eh,
the user is an active participant in their own
yes.
selling. You know what I mean?
One of the things the guerrilla marketing the guy who started writing all the books, he told a story how him and other marketing people were catching a cab to go somewhere, and the cabbie's chatting. Hey, so what do you guys do? They're like, oh, we're in the market. He says, oh, I don't believe any of that stuff. They're like, oh, really? They're like, well, what toothpaste do you use? And the guy said, blah, such and such a toothpaste. They go, oh, why is that? He's like, well, no, it's just because I really don't have time to brush very much and I need it quick. And they laughed because that was exactly what the toothbrush company's slogan was on the
Yes,
commercials.
that's so funny. That long ago, even before the memes penetrated, if you will, there was the idea of subliminal seduction. There were a
Yeah,
couple
oh
of books
yeah.
in
I
the
went to a
60s.
talk on that.
Exactly. It's like they embed images in advertising stuff that you don't know why, but you find it very interesting, very attractive. And there were some like, oh, it's death. there's little skulls in there because people like really are fascinated by that, even though they're scared by it. Fascinated doesn't have to be that you love it. It can be that you hate it. But if you see a scorpion, you don't stop looking at the scorpion until it's away from you. You know what I mean? So, and then of course there was sex. There was the word sex. There was, oh no, is that like a little naughty couple in the ice cubes in this drink? And
Right.
what's funny is they kind of, when advertisers thought they had to sneak it in on you, they were embarrassed themselves about the power they knew they had to plant an idea in somebody's head. And after a while, they just said, no, have a woman in a scanty outfit climb on top of that car and you'll see car sales go up. And so, that whole thing of where the advertiser, and that's kind of funny. I don't know why I have a block about this. There's a particular guy, probably like there's a character in Mad Men named after him because he's so infamous that he was the first one to say, you don't have to sell a car based on what mileage you get or how safe it is. You just have to say, if you get this car, you get the girl.
What's the
And
classic line? The line is sex sells,
yes,
you know?
exactly. And just think of everything. When they started to have, I don't know, shaving cream, it wasn't, this will give you a nice shave. It was,
Right.
and then the woman comes over and can't help but touch your nice, smooth face, can't touch your,
Right.
and it was for women as well. You know what I mean? That like, if you, guys have, I'm trying to say, it wasn't only that it was all about guys are bow hunks that are going to just take, this in and, oh my God, I'm programmed.
Right.
Women have been sold forever on, if you do this thing, your house will be nicer, your clothes will be cleaner, you'll be more attractive.
Right.
And there's a lot of proof. Again, it's kind of funny to bring things into it. It isn't only rumor. They've done scientific studies that say, yep, this really works. And it works where it gets your attention without you really understanding why. And it works the more you see it, the more you internalize it. So you start to know, you can start singing, I'm stuck on Band-Aids, and all the world knows what the next line is. As much as if there was the line in the Constitution about, hey, we have the right to vote. You know what I mean? Like, it should be that
Exactly. Yep.
equally
It,
important.
it's basic marketing 101 nowadays.
Yes.
That's what they
No,
teach. They don't sell the features; they sell how it will make people feel. You talk about how you market is what are the why would someone want to use this, not what the features are.
absolutely. I mean,
And the funny thing is, without even thinking about it, I see sometimes people doing it like on eBay. They're not selling, oh, this guitar has 6 strings, whatever. It's like
glossy. Yeah,
it plays as smooth as silk, and
right.
and it's on
Here it is
eBay.
nestled between my breasts. It's like, wait,
There
what?
you go.
It's like, and yet it works and it never stops working.
Yeah.
So the non-dark side of that is, there's been computer companies, and Apple was an early one, where they really had design as part of what was going on. Steve Jobs knew that the way that to get people to adopt these things wasn't only, and computers might have been one of those things that all early on it was about specs. How fast is your CPU? How much memory do you have, et cetera, et cetera. But when you started to have a friendly face on your computer, it humanized it, personalized it. It made you have a relationship with it, and depending on what color it was, depending on was it rounded contours, and instead of just being beige boxes, they found a way to introduce design into it. And in some cases, it really mattered. An ergonomic keyboard is so much better for avoiding carpal tunnel than a regular one. How you hold your iPhone and where they position the buttons so you get fewer false taps and you don't get like wrist craning and stuff like that because of how you hold it. Jonathan Ivey is an amazing guy for having designed multiple families of products that really were very human oriented. This is how you want to look at something, that when they went, as they got higher and higher um, number of pixels on the screen, it was because one of the biggest complaints was it's just too blocky and it doesn't move quickly enough. I want something that I never have to know it's a computer. I want it to be I'm watching a little movie. I want it to be that I hear the voice, all those kinds of things. And that's so much of what we then designed computers to be. It wasn't only advancing the CPU, it was making sure that we got better and better audio and video and human factors so that like everything about a haptic feedback when you're playing games, that you get like a little bit of rumble in your chair or in your keyboard because, oh my God, you're taking fire. And that's obvious stuff, but there's even little other things like the fact you need to sometimes be on buzz on vibrate as compared to on an audio signal. Well, they experimented with every single kind of buzz, and they said, what's the one that's going to be welcome, and I get
Right.
that I have something coming in, as opposed to, oh, I just got electrocuted. And
Yeah.
and just, it's amazing how much they really put a ton of time into all that now, so that most of the times when things come to market, they really are elegant. They really are well thought out and integrated, and they're already like, I need to sell this to 100 million people. It can't have any things where 50 million are going to say, I hate that color so much I would never buy one. You know what I mean? And why, you don't know, but they still, or I need
And,
to have all 10 colors so that if I know it isn't color that matters, but it does matter to some people, then at least I'll have 6 different colors so that I'll capture each demographic segment that's
and
based on chroma.
it's funny you bring up and mention Apple in this regard, because Apple has it nailed down so perfectly. They know who they're selling to. And back in the day, yes, we're selling to computer geeks. Look at this processor speed. Look at the, you don't see that anymore. Most people that own an Apple could not tell you the specs at all of
You're
that Apple.
exactly right, Stephen. You're
And
exactly
go
right.
look at their commercials, because they are masters. In fact, I've been working with a coach for writing and publishing, and he pointed me to several Apple commercials when we were talking about brand and identity. They're like, what is Apple selling? They do commercials where they don't focus at all on tech at all. Yes, you'll see people with an iPhone doing something. You'll see somebody with a Mac sitting on but it's almost in the background, because what they're selling is unleash your creativity. This is a part of your life, and you can be a professional movie maker, and you can unleash, that has been their thing lately. And just go watch their commercials. Look at the ones at Christmas. It's not about we're selling you an Apple product. We're selling you the memories, the feel good. They had the one where the kid
Absolutely.
was always on his iPad the whole Christmas time, and the family's always like, hey, get off that. No words, it's all music, and you
Yeah,
just see the actions. And at the end, he shows a video he made of their Christmas break on
exactly.
the iPad, and everybody's
And
like
then the
crying
last
and stuff.
2 seconds of fade out is the Apple logo.
Yes,
Exactly. You know
that's
what I
it.
mean? So that,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of funny. So before I came to Cleveland, I lived in Chicago, and I was actually president of the rest of us. It was the Big Mac user group for Chicago. And we had all kinds of wonderful opportunities to have big people come and talk to our user group, because we were so big and we were downtown, so we were business legit, if you will. So we had Bill Gates. We had one of the guys that was so revealing about Apple's brilliance was a guy named Guy Kawasaki. I'm not
Oh
sure if you
yeah.
have heard of him. And the big thing that he talked about was, what does Apple have? It doesn't have a lead salesman, it has a lead evangelist. That his way of thinking about what you're going to do with the Mac is continually, look at all the good things you can do. Look how much better your life will be. Look at how,
Yes,
there's power and beauty and
that's it.
glory and wonder in this thing. And it wasn't, hey, let's narrow your choices based on specs until on balance, you need to go with the Macintosh. It wasn't selling any of those things. It was
And
selling
that's
the
when they brought Steve
experience.
Jobs back.
That's exactly right. He had been one of the early guys to get that what the Macintosh was going to be about was, it's much better to be a pirate than to join the Navy. He wanted to do something that was revolutionary, and still, I know we're jumping around, but we're having our as usual, our threads reweave together.
Yes.
He did get the absolute most brilliant people. When you look at the list of who developed the Macintosh, Jeff Rask, it's kind of funny, the the things he picked up, often they talked about, like Don Engelbart was the guy to do the mouse at Xerox, if I remember correctly. And so they said, well, this is really a better input device. But how did the Macintosh come to be? Because they brought together this fantastic team of half a dozen, 10 people that were the best coder in the world, the best electronics guy in the world, the best font designer, like all, and guys and gals. And so you really got, it wasn't only a boys club. It was really, there were people that were going to be every one of those Apple icons that were what they used to call, it's lickable. It looks so perfect on screen that it's a very human reaction to, that's the perfect disk, the perfect little computer, the perfect dog cow, if I can like really geek it up for a minute. And to have them, like, they locked them away, and said, see what we can do in the course of 6 months, a year. And that Skunkworks project might be one of the most successful Skunkworks projects in the world. I'm sure they, maybe we'll see what would compare the Manhattan Project. You know what I mean?
There
We got
you
to
go.
win the war, and so I know I'm being kind of an ass in terms of saying it isn't, of course, anywhere near as important, but I'm not sure that I think that's true. The Macintosh
Yeah.
changed the world as we know it, just like the atom bomb did. And in a lot of ways, it's a weapon of destruction versus construction, maybe peacekeeping versus, I don't know, it's arguable depending on what criteria you use. And
I,
still, it was a most successful project.
I
So
wrote a small article about how, with the pandemic and everyone being on lockdown and the stress and everything with the politics and all that. And I was thinking, well, how the heck does writing fiction even counter any of that, or not counter, but how does it seem important compared to all this big stuff going on? And I realized, I'm like, wait, it really does, because people need that escape. They need that. And writing fiction could save lives. If it de-stresses you, if it takes you to another world for enjoyment, that's important. So what you're saying, and I
I
remember.
totally agree, Steve. As much as they, sorry, please go ahead.
No, no. I was going to say, bouncing back to what you were saying about the icons and stuff. Do you remember Microsoft's counter to that was paperclip? Remember the little
Clippy, exactly, which
Clippy?
is
Yeah,
still mocked to this day. You know what I mean? Clippy comes up on the screen and says, "Hey, would you like me to misspell a few words and put it all in capitals so that they know you're a raving lunatic?" You know
right.
that.
And I want to make sure we point out and remember, and I know this is just superficially the circumstance of events, but right before Apple went bankrupt and folded, Bill Gates jumped in from Microsoft and helped them come back from the
Absolutely.
debt.
You
You
know
know,
that they that the history of Apple and how they, as it's kind of like there's analogies with Betamax versus VHS and stuff like that, that the superior product doesn't always win. When you got the ease of use, the incredible installed base, the cheapness, there's all kinds of ways for a better product to just not make headway. And
yeah,
Apple wanted to be like the Porsche of computers. Well, Porsche, for all that it's beautifully revered, it's still what, 0.5% of the market? And you
expensive.
can do that in the auto world and still be a viable
Right.
company. Can't necessarily do that when you're trying to create an entire new standard, but all the peripheral makers are saying, I'm going to make my HP says, I don't know that I want to make you a printer. You know what I mean? I'm going to continue to make my ones for the Windows because I'm selling kabillions over here.
Right.
And
Yep.
the fact that you're using PostScript instead of, anyway.
And I know at that time, and even now, people would say, well, of course Microsoft wanted to do that because they didn't want to get hit with antitrust and having a monopoly. And they wanted to say, hey, well, now you have to use our products and this, that, and the other thing. Arguably, yes. That's business. I mean, I probably would do the same thing. But does that mean it was bad for the people in the market? I don't think so. But I really 100% believe, and you'll never convince me otherwise, that Bill Gates really did it because he knew it was a good thing and knew even if it was competition for Microsoft. Because I'll tell you, there is no bigger philanthropist on this planet than Bill Gates. And
Currently, that's exactly true. Back then, he was a very staunch business competitor,
yeah,
but yes, even then, he must have had some in him that says, "I'm not just about making all the money in the world. I kind of want to make the world a better place
yeah,
too. And why would I like if just like the Mac was the skunk works for Apple, if Apple is the proof of concept company for Microsoft." That I want to see how far they can go with WYSIWYG. I want to see how far they can go with better user interfaces and universal networking and all the cool things that Apple introduced. He was like, I can throw them a lifeline. I can give them money to develop ostensibly Microsoft Office and keep the
yeah.
company alive. But I don't know, a really smart businessman would have said, I'm happy to see what they come up with, and then I'll do my own version.
Well, you know,
I'll my embrace, extend, and extinguish
yeah,
version. But
I heard a quote or a fact years ago that Bill Gates was like the biggest philanthropist in the world. He wasn't the richest person, but the percentage of his income that he put into philanthropy projects was something like 60%. And people are like, well, of course he has tons of money. I'm like, but stop. All the basketball players have tons of money. All
they're
the
not
other,
necessarily
yeah,
curing
yeah,
river blindness in Uganda and
exactly.
stuff like that. That's right.
If you go with percentage, I don't care if he's making 1 million or 100 million or 1 billion. He's putting 60% of that money to the world and giving away. I've never heard of Bill Gates driving a gold Cadillac, or
Like that.
maybe he has a big house and he has a lot of tech in his house. But he also created one of the biggest companies ever. So, what
Agree.
would anyone else do?
You know,
The normal person would be taking cruises and all sorts of stuff.
yeah. I've read some interesting articles about there was a particular inflection point, like maybe in the early 80s, maybe late 80s, where him, Warren Buffett, Ted Turner, a number of like, we've made it, we really own the world. What are we going to do to make the world a better place? I don't want to spend my money like on a desert island that's the only livable place left on the planet. And so they all made like a vow to say, either right now or within my lifetime, I'm going to give away 90% of what I've made. And like you were saying with Bill Gates, 60 is a good number. I don't know that, but I know that the Gates Foundation was created with vast amounts of wealth so they could take on those big problems. And same with Buffett. And it's kind of funny. Some of the other mega titans read that and they were like, says Larry Ellison from Oracle, screw that. I'm going to keep playing the game. And all you've done is just give me a competitive advantage by now not being as much about making every dollar
Right.
available. And so I've even then, back then, when there were a whole bunch of anti-Microsoft things to be said about, are they winning by technology or by lawyers? Are they really doing a lot of extinguishing and not only creating? But that was a really good sign for, we've needed Carnegie's and Ford's and MacArthur's to create. I made all this money, and what am I going to do with it? How about if I make libraries everywhere? How about if I send kids to school? How about if I buy land and give it as a national park? There was vision for the power of that kind of money that wasn't just, I want to have a gold plated toilet. And the sickness of that
Yeah.
sociopathic greed, they
Yeah.
didn't have it. There still were others that did. And
And there
so,
still are.
and there still are now,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And
So
so that,
you may have seen this too. Do you know who the biggest farmer is in our country? The person that has the most farmland, does the most farming in the US?
I don't.
Bill
How about,
Gates.
is it really?
It is.
See,
He has the
that sounds
most.
like Monsanto or some big farming
No,
chemical combine that might have
no,
bought up land, but
because
Bill
he's
Gates?
working on experiments and to try and have better farming capabilities and how to get more quantity of produce and this and that, so he can take it to Africa. He can take it to other countries. But he bought land here, and he's got top scientists and stuff working on it, so that it's better for everywhere else in the world. I
See,
mean,
that's wonderful to know. And in fact, this is kind of funny. One of the things I've always admired about Bill Gates was he he's very good at not just saying, here's what I know. He's very good at looking at the world and saying, who else is doing good things? And what about those good practices, good inventions can I adopt and spread even further? So that makes perfect sense. And it's kind of funny. I don't know why I'm blanking out on names today. There's a famous scientist that's responsible for golden rice. If rice is going to be the biggest crop in the world, but you find a way to get iodine into it so that you stop that. Let's see, which one is iodine? Goiter? What is it? What does it prevent? I think goiter,
yeah,
maybe,
I think
right?
so. One of them,
There's those
something like that.
one of those malnutrition diseases. You have to have vitamin C to avoid scurvy and those other things. And so the fact that we have, like, I don't know, chlorine in our drinking water, not to go down that weird
Yeah,
conspiracy path, but
fluoride.
that's made it so that we, whatever used to happen with people's teeth rotting out of their heads over the course of their life, now that doesn't happen as much anymore. And same with this fine scientist. And so, coming back to Bill Gates, he must have read, when you can do that kind of thing, that you find a way, not the, hey, I made a bunny glow way of doing DNA manipulation, but I can hybridize something that is this much hardier in all environments, so that if we're trying to stop the desertification of Africa, where the Sahara is spreading, we're going to make trees, crops, something that can grow in difficult conditions, more arid conditions, more not perfect pure water, or combinations where there's salt and fresh.
Yeah.
What can really do that? Can I get some mangrove DNA spliced into various other things?
Right.
And the fact that you really have that ability, if you're there's a great line in a Batman comic book where he's able to, create artificial kryptonite. You'd have to have millions of dollars and many years in order to be able to do this. Luckily, I had both.
Right, right.
And so Bill Gates is the closest we have to Batman. People wonder about, if you had that kind of money, wouldn't you want to like fight crime, make the world a better place, fix things that are systemically terribly wrong with the world? I think that Bill might have read some comic books. I
Yeah.
think that he might be
Oh,
one of those
well,
geeks
well,
that
he's
really.
definitely an uber nerd. I'll give him that. And better yet, I mean, everyone says, "Oh, he's a shrewd businessman," but yes, he definitely is. I mean, look at what he did. But he got there because he's like a freaking genius.
He
He is
really
so
is.
smart, and he did all of this and knew what to do, and now he's applying it in a very positive way. So
Another thing I
I
used
love
to
the
read
guy.
about Gates was that he would take a sabbatical and he would go read like the top 10 science books, business books, sociology books. And like a lot of what I got out of going to futurist conferences was you really had to have that ability to see that there's relationships between things that are not obvious, that there's, and that to find the golden path, the golden, very bad way to put it. Global Business Network was really good about saying you don't have to pick the way you want the world to be and force the world to conform to that. You can say there's 20 different ways in which the world can be a better thing. What are all the little incremental tweaks that I can make to existing systems so that the odds are good, that I'll end up with a good outcome overall? It's not dictatorial, it's enabling. It's beautiful planning for the future, not in a manipulative way, in a just hedge your bets in all the right ways. And so the fact that he's been really good at that, of saying, like, I don't know, I just joined Gates Notes, I think it's called that, right? Where the next thing he's taken on is climate change.
Yes.
And honestly, he's been working on it for a while, but now he's really kind of formalized. This is one of the biggest problems that we're facing, and we have to do something about it. And so all of what he's done to learn more about um, crops and how to handle how we grow those things so that they're less resource intensive. How are we going to handle our energy grid? How are we going to handle the vast weather changes that we brought upon ourselves? It's very cool that he's now formalizing, like, this kind of needs a big name behind it. Even the former head of NASA scientist wasn't a big enough name to get everyone to say, we got to be dead serious about this. Even the vice president of the United States, Al Gore, was not big enough to be
Well,
able to get.
he already did. He invented the internet. He's done enough for us.
See, so why the mock? You know what I mean? He's another guy that he's just so amazingly bright, and that's exactly what the jerks use to dismiss him, instead
Right.
of
Yes.
saying he's only 5 times as smart as you, so you have to not you, everyone that
Right.
says
I
those
know. I
kinds
know.
of
I know.
things. And it's just weird that that's the people that have a defense mechanism of, maybe for once we should have listened to the experts, because now we're counting on the smart people to fix the world again.
Yeah.
The
But they still
idiots
don't
have
want to listen.
screwed things up, and even if they don't want to listen, now it's like, well, now we know all your tricks. We know that you're going to deny facts. We know that you're going to try to suppress the vote. We know that you're going to continue to. Now we know that the smart people have to not only be smart but cunning.
Yeah.
That
And,
there's a great quote about that. You know what I mean? That sometimes villains are really chagrined when they find out that good people can be smart too,
right.
because they're used to doing everything as a scam. Is there anything that Trump has ever done that wasn't with the assumption that he's going to be able to put one over on you? I'll lie to your face and then bring the lawyers in to make sure that I take no
Right.
repercussions from it. So he's not the only one doing that. There's been
Yep.
crappy people forever trying to not give value for value. And hey, everybody should read the Repairman Jack books, because they're all about that. That it's not about how can I get up on you, how can I fake you out, how can I pad my expense report, that if I do a good thing and you pay me like money that is worth what it should be worth, the whole world gets better because of that. There's a virtuous circle instead of a vicious circle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's the light side and dark side, and the dark side isn't stronger.
And but that it sure is that a lot of people are, however, seduced by the dark side. That
Yeah.
if they lied and got out of trouble, they now have a pattern for the rest of their life is, I'm going to try that lie again. I'm
Yeah.
going to sneak around. I'm going to find a way to deflect blame. I'm going to find a way that I'm not going to make anything of my own. But if I'm the one that's taking in the stuff and I can wet my beak a little bit at everybody else's expense, but they'll never know because it's only a little, but I still got something for nothing. you can see the various different like kinds of villains that have been created by kind of parents being crappy parents and not coming down early with you don't lie, you don't cheat, you don't steal, and you don't tolerate those who do. That's why that's in the Marine, slogan. I think it's the
Right.
Marines, right? And so wow, for all, and this is interesting, for all that I hear from the supposed virtue quats, that the failings of the United States are based on, oh no, bad music, oh no, bad video games, oh no, swear words. They're based on so much of what you do has been a scam forever. That you
Yeah.
offer nothing for the money you take in. And funny how, as much as you might be taking in money and you're happy to extol, well, we have food drives and we have, things that go to other countries and help. But the ratio, when you look at the various different charity sites that tell you how much money is really getting spent, they're terrible for all kinds of virtuous, supposedly, charities that the people at the top are just raking in money and
Oh
driving
yeah.
their gold
Oh,
Cadillacs like you
yeah.
laughed about. And, all you need to do is see one more overhead shot of Joel Osteen's compound. And it's like, wow, I hope all those folks who paid up for their salvation know that this guy has been a terrible parasite on their body for a
Yeah.
long time.
Well,
And sorry if I'm going to get us sued over this, but I
yeah.
don't, I don't, I don't think you can get sued over telling the truth. You know
Right.
what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
Like there's all kinds of expose books that talk about, wow, these people are really making out.
All I gotta say for that is what you were just all saying is Star Wars is life. I mean, you can relate it back to Star Wars.
I guess George Lucas was really good about making a parable. It wasn't just a
It's
science
a
fiction
mythology.
movie. It was here's the world. You know what I mean? It's that you do have choices to make. When people often ask me about why do I read comic books or like heroic fiction in general, it's because I've always thought that was a really good thing to learn, to know like if you're in that moment of choice, if you're in that pressure point, would you choose the right or not?
Right.
Would you stand up or
Or
would
would
you
you let
cower?
it slip, according to Eminem?
Exactly. And just that, would you put on the mask or would you? Oh man, it's just. Yeah, I think that that's some of the stuff that maybe the reason we should still have that in the curriculum is because it's not only understanding the human condition, it's also what's the ideal of that and how do you aspire to be
Right.
a good
And
person in a tough world?
and
You know what I
likening
mean?
that back to what we were saying with Bill Gates, I mean, he was a shrewd businessman, but then he turns right around and saves Apple. And, look at all the stuff Apple's done since then. And now he's doing all this stuff with philanthropy and that. He's a smart, smart man, but he's not the villain. I mean, there are people nowadays we hear about that are much worse. And
Absolutely.
what you were saying about Bill reading all those books and, putting the pieces together, that is kind of how the whole Mensa IQ test goes. It's not if you've got, your Jeopardy trivia memorized. It's the analyzing, the analytical. That's how they're measuring it. And man, we could go into an argument and discussion on genius and what constitutes genius and who should be considered genius.
Right.
But in this particular case, that's, how it's quantified is here's, what you did. And that man, he knows how to do it. And he's, you know,
It's kind of funny. I love learning about that. One of the being a smarty from early on, I was curious as to, well, why? What do I have that other people don't? And how does it evidence itself? And it wasn't just, okay, I retain better, I have a good memory. It was, I see things quickly. I find those
right,
patterns relatively quickly. I make pretty accurate guesses and maybe predictions based on incomplete data. Then instead of being trapped in the I need to have A goes to B goes to C, I can have fuzzy logic kind of built into my head. And early on when you're like making a good guess about and kind of I don't want to give crappy examples. There are some things where the first time you have an adult kind of like look sideways at you as you just said something that you really shouldn't know how that works yet. Do you know what I mean? I was
yeah,
aware of all of those things when I was early. Understanding music and understanding, Colleen will tell you, one of the weird ways that I'm evidencing this all the time nowadays is we're watching TV and I'll like say the next line of dialogue.
right,
And it happens all the time nowadays. And not only on a scripted thing where you could say, you watch enough episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and you know kind of what's going on.
right.
But
If
even
it's
like
written well,
if it's written well, exactly. But also like we're watching the baking show and I'll be like, I continue, not continually, because I don't want, one of the odd things you have when you decide that you're the Messiah and you see all the future is that you remember all the times it worked and you dismiss all the times it didn't.
Yes, yeah,
So of
yeah.
course, I do it all the time. I probably do it 10% of the time, but it sure isn't zero or one. It's often enough nowadays that it's really kind of weird. And I will look over her and say, Pook, I don't know where this is coming from. I have no idea why I'm so weirdly tuned. Have I reached that critical mass of I've now watched enough TV and read enough books and listened to enough music that I kind of know what the next thing should be, or at least I make a good enough guess. And it's also, if you get it where it's like 50%, 80% right, you just missed one word, it still is. I don't know that I want the world, that is everything in the world now. I'm the spoiler, that if I just say
Yeah,
something, I'm going to wreck it. So I have to be quiet. So it's a little weird.
yeah.
But having
You
said
can't even
that,
get stop it. Well,
or
here, how about this one? So, see, if you're talking with people, you have a topic kind of like we do. Oh, this topic, it merges into this other topic, and then something else, and you're going on. Then you get to like the fourth or fifth topic, and someone says something and you make a comment, but it's because it ties it back to the first topic. And then everyone looks at like, what are you talking about? I'm like, well, because we talked about this. And they're like, how did you put that together? I mean, it wasn't until recent years that I started catching that happening more often. And I'm going, don't you people see how it all ties together, what we're talking about? So, okay.
there's I think it's a matter of capacity. Like I've read in New York Times that you can remember like three things relatively well long term, and seven things short term. Well, I don't seem to have that at all. Like you've laughed about when I'm at let's say a Mensa gathering and people are sitting around the table, and I not only hear what's being said at the table, but there's also snatches of conversations from elsewhere. And once in a while, I'll walk by someone, and I haven't been eavesdropping, but I'll say, by the way, the author of that book is this, and they'll give you that look for like, how in the world? Are you psychic? Do you really have like ears that catch every conversation in the room? And I don't think I do, but I know that I have some weird thing that I get to push things onto the stack and have multiple stacks so that I have all kinds of things that I can say, chime in with, compute on, et cetera, et
Yeah,
cetera. And then when they
exactly.
come off, I can offer them. And it really might, as you just said, come across as weird. We're like, hey, we kind of talked about that 20 minutes ago. Yeah, but it still matters because this thing is a really good way of tying that back to here. And there's an elegance to that of bringing it so that it kind of comes not full circle and not knotted, but that you really were paying attention. I think one of the best gifts I can give my friends is to really listen to them
Yeah.
and to not think only of what I'm going to say next, which is kind of the impression of what I just said. But honestly, all that's going on in the background. I'm not tuning people out while I'm trying to think of what to say. I'm taking it all in. And I have this very interesting set of, like, I have a multi processor background processing system that is always offering up, here could be a good joke, here could be a good reference. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Here's where you say, in empathy, wow, that must be really hard. And it's not that I'm faking it. It's not that I don't feel the empathy. It's just that it, I get all these offers, and it's very interesting to choose which one to say. And that sometimes you're very like happy you didn't say something because then somebody else said it anyway and you didn't want to cross as the know-it-all. And sometimes you're happy that you saved it for later because then they're especially tickled by, I don't know,
Yeah.
it can be both frustrating and satisfying to have
You got to figure
all
out
these
what
things.
to say in the right
Yeah,
group. I know when Gina and I were first dating, a lot of times at some point she started like turning to me and say, "Well, what is this? What do you think?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know. I've never ran into this or seen that or whatever it would be." She goes, "But you like seem to know everything, don't you know this?" And you think about it, and it's not like I'm trying to be a know-it-all. It's just I think my brain can see things and in context analyze it and pick up clues or whatever, so I can sometimes it's wrong, but I can make judgments,
at least
we
have
said,
a next step to what I want to think
yeah,
about and inquire about
yeah,
it. Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
Stargate, they're going to another planet and Carter starts spewing off that, oh, well, that makes sense that this planet is like this because the people do this and the atmosphere is like this. And Jack's like, do I need to shoot it? I mean, it's just those two different ways of analyzing things.
Exactly.
She's never been there, she's never seen it, but based on the knowledge she does have, she can make a educated guess on what something is. And
Yeah.
Gina will turn to me, well, what is this? And I'm like, well, hold on, let me look at it a second, you know?
Exactly. What's interesting about that is that it can be one of the things I say often nowadays is, and maybe because I've had this interesting predictive ability for a long time, but I just kind of kept it to myself or I kept it low level. But I've always enjoyed any movie, song, whatever that can surprise me because after you get really good at it, it is a little bit just like going through the motions. And I don't mean to be dismissive in that way, but it isn't as satisfying as, wow, I did not see that plot twist
Right.
coming, and I often do. And so, how smart, what craft, how interesting that they were able to take me down the primrose path, and they knew where they wanted me to go, and then they do that perfect rug pull where it's not. Well, that's not fair. It's more like, oh, that's so crafty that you got me to go that way, even though you laid the clues. And
Right.
I often get that little. Do you get this? Where they have at the end of The Usual Suspects after the reveal, and the policeman character is like looking at the bulletin board and he's seeing all the things that the suspect had said and realize this whole movie has been a tissue of lies. And so often it'll be when I get the big reveal in a cool show, it'll be that I kind of have these flashbacks and say, that's where that, yes, it wasn't really a vampire. Yes, it was, there were two copies of it and whatever else those things might be. It's like, so it wasn't unfair. It really makes all perfect sense, but they were really good at misdirecting my attention.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean? I
But it
love that.
has to be done very well and well crafted, because just
It was
changing
clumsy,
something.
it's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things Gina's been rolling her eyes at me because I've been delving more into story and analyzing story and craft and all that, obviously. So we'll watch something, and like the other night, again, Stargate, there was an episode we were watching, and I start ranting about, okay, wait a second. They said they had to do this particular thing for this reason, but they're not doing that at all. And they totally forgot about it for the
Right.
big climax. I'm like, honestly, it kind of ruins it for me now because they didn't follow through with what they promised and what they said they were going to do. And it's really a good exercise for me as a writer, because I'm like, oh, okay, I see, they said this, that, and the other thing, but then they didn't do that later and follow through with it. So it really kind of ruined it. And I can see how that makes things not, and now it
It's a
hurts.
great way to look at it. You know what I mean? That you're wanting to have resolution, and then they have this glaring
Yeah.
miss that they.
Yeah.
Wow, wow,
And they
yeah,
did it solely for the purpose to have a big emotional climax to the episode, but I'm like, well, actually, it kinda takes away from it. You know, it's just bad writing, lazy writing.
yeah.
Now, forgive them. I know trying to do a weekly TV show, sometimes it's like, just do this, we gotta move," you know?
Right,
I get
right.
that too, but it's
You
a
know,
good exercise for me as a writer.
I was in debate in high school, and so it's not the cool things you're talking about with story and being a good writer, but it has enough similarity. Part of what you do while the debate was going on is you had a flow chart as to what did they say, what did you say in response, how are you offering the right amount of evidence to win the point, and one thing was, however, you had to at least respond to almost everything. That some things weren't easily just summarily dismissed. It would count against you if you hadn't responded to everything. And so that kind of thing of wanting to make sure that there's closure on every point, or at least that it makes sense not only in the debate context but in the story context, because sometimes you don't know what the reader is going to say. That really was important to me, and then you let it fall on the floor. So there's and sometimes it's a matter a little bit of there's many number of comic book series that they only had 6 issues and they didn't get to everything because they thought they were going to go to 12. And then you're left hanging because it got truncated, not
Right.
clumsily unresolved. But when you know they made choices, and like whatever, people have told me that I really should watch the series Lost. I've never seen it because early on it came to me as if it was a little too random, a little too let's just try this. And that
Yes.
many people at the end, to my kind of ugly satisfaction, they were like, yeah, in the end, it made no sense. In the end, there was all kinds of unresolved. What the hell about the polar bear? What was the hatch? You know what I mean? I can drop references if I know what's going on, but there was all kinds of stuff that they just, part of the show was as if it was dream logic, that it doesn't have to make any sense. It just kind of jumps from scene to scene, or things matter, but then they don't, and they morph from one into the other. And I don't
It
know, I
was
don't find 8 seasons of that super
it was
satisfying.
somebody it was somebody that wanted to make Twin Peaks, but they weren't David Lynch.
Interesting. So
You know?
that level of skill didn't really.
Right.
From what I is it Lindelof, right? David Lindelof. He's made other good movies, and so I don't know why that particular series, did it go on too long? Did it go on too short? I'm not sure what was the miss there. You know what
I
I mean?
think
But
I think arguably they had an idea, but they didn't do a long-term plan. Again, getting back to writing and publishing, you know, a lot of the biggest authors tell you you should outline, you should plan, especially if you have a series, because
see,
you get the
that's what I
book.
would have to do. I want to
Yeah,
have an idea where
right,
things are going, so that I can lay the seeds early, or so that I can have my characters be consistent, or that if they make a change, it's based on real reasons or trauma, not just, oh, he's different in this
right.
book. Why?
And
What the hell?
and little
You know?
things you throw in book one that resolve and come back in book four. You can't plan for that once you get to book four. And I think Lost missed that they had an idea and then they're like, oh, this is popular. Well, let's do this. And then it kind of went off the rails and they didn't have a goal and a plan they were working toward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'll
that's
tell
what
you,
happened.
that's one of those shows that nowadays I'm like, I'm still curious. People really were entranced by it for years and years. But then I look, it's like, wow, like 90 episodes or something. Am I really going to put 90 hours into this? I don't know. I don't know that I'm ever going to, and even in lockdown, you know what I mean? The pandemic has solidified for me, even if I had all the time in the world, there's some things I'm never going to end up
Yeah.
watching. You
Yep.
know, as much as I used to like Cheers, I thought it was funny, but there's like 300 episodes of it. And when Colleen and I started to watch it again, it was like, that's like 4 laughs and a half an hour. There's 30 laughs in it, and
Right.
I want there
You're
to be
getting,
more to it. I don't want it to be, there's so many jokes
yeah.
are about how stupid someone is. So many jokes are the bad choices you made while drinking. That doesn't impact my life. You know what I mean? I'm just
Right.
not about those things. So anyway,
Yeah. So all right. Well, hey, we've gone quite a while because we started late. We've got like 10 minutes of test audio we could use if we wanted.
as always, I love that even though we jump around, it's not random. It isn't that we just kind of like non sequitur after non sequitur and
It's,
that both of us are left reeling. It's a delight to see where your mind goes and to go there with you and to like have fun with the things that we enjoy and that
it
kind of
is.
like you don't know why sometimes they're interesting or entrancing to us, but they are, and there's something worth investigating that. So understanding that you are a smarty and that gives you like powers, but also responsibilities to go with Spider-Man for a moment. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
just, it's, it's, I love that we're still doing this. And I love that
Yeah.
I don't see it ever having to stop. I get
Yeah.
the
It's
same
too many
charge
things.
out of this all the time. So
Well, I didn't get to it this week, but I definitely have to tell you about my cheesy writer next week.
very good.
That's the cliffhanger for the week. Woo-hoo.
By the way, check into, as you know, we might have a possibility of doing, a live podcast from
Again.
the Damnations RG, but depending on what they're doing as to whether it's going to be a 3-day or a 1-day, and if
Right.
your Saturday is really too full, then I will take that, I think that's what we want to do, right? Is that I'll be doing a presentation, but if it doesn't work, because you don't want to like overschedule yourself and have Adam waiting for his birthday on this silly thing. I'll take us back out of that because you know that there's still things coming up from
Oh
Columbus,
yeah.
from Cincinnati, from Chicago, from Pittsburgh. We'll be able to offer this kind of thing, even if not physically live. We can do this cool thing, and based on the theme of most RGs, anywhere. I think that we really got good feedback from both Chicago and
Yeah. People
Cincinnati.
enjoyed that.
Exactly. So I'm happy to share this.
I
That's very
agree.
cool.
All right, man.
Cheers. Bye bye,
Good luck
Stephen.
with your Mac.
He seems to be like the fact that he didn't crap out on me while we were doing this live
Right?
podcast, exercising its audio and video, and
Oh,
I'm
do the little rain
reassured.
dance thing.
The fact that my main hard drive, where all my life lives, is good and intact and fine, really matters. It was really a very good few moments. You know what I mean? So,
Good
okay,
job. All right,
care.
later.